I should have known trouble was brewing when I saw Karen Pemberton marching across my front lawn with her clipboard and measuring tape. As president of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, she took her duties seriously. Perhaps too seriously. I was kneeling in my garden, carefully transplanting some French lavender I had ordered from a specialty nursery in Provence, when her shadow fell across my work. Karen speaking in her shrill, authoritative voice, "Good morning, resident. I need to discuss your landscaping choices with you immediately. According to Section 4-2-7 of our community guidelines, all front yard plantings must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee before installation." I looked up from my gardening gloves, brushing soil from my hands. The lavender had cost me $300, not including shipping from France, but I had fallen in love with the variety during a consulting trip to Marseille last month. My landscape architecture background made me particular about plant selection, and this Lavandula angustifolia Munstead was supposed to be the centerpiece of my Mediterranean-themed garden design. I explained to Karen that I had actually submitted the landscaping plan 6 weeks ago, complete with detailed drawings and plant specifications. I even mentioned that my previous work designing gardens for several prominent clients in the area had taught me the importance of following proper procedures. Karen's voice becoming more aggressive, "That is completely irrelevant. I have no record of any submission, and furthermore, I can see from here that you are planting non-approved species. Our community standards require native plants only, and lavender is not indigenous to this region." The irony was not lost on me that Karen's own front yard featured at least a dozen non-native species, including English roses and Japanese maples. But I kept my voice level and suggested we could resolve this through the proper channels. I offered to resubmit my landscaping plan and even volunteered to provide documentation proving that English lavender, while not technically native, was widely accepted in local xeriscaping initiatives. Karen becoming increasingly hostile, "You cannot simply plant whatever you want and expect retroactive approval. I am issuing you a formal violation notice, and you have 72 hours to remove all non-compliant vegetation or face daily fines of $50. As someone who had spent the last decade building a successful environmental consulting firm, I was accustomed to dealing with bureaucracy and unreasonable regulations. My company specialized in helping municipalities navigate complex environmental compliance issues, which meant I understood exactly how homeowners associations operated and what legal authority they actually possessed. I calmly informed Karen that I would be happy to attend the next board meeting to discuss the matter properly. Over the following weeks, Karen's harassment escalated dramatically. She began driving by my house multiple times per day, photographing my lavender from different angles. She sent certified letters demanding immediate compliance, each one more threatening than the last. She even started a neighborhood email chain discussing rogue landscaping and the dangerous precedent my lavender represented for property values. The situation reached a breaking point when I returned from a business trip to find an official citation taped to my front door. Karen had somehow convinced the City Code Enforcement Office to investigate my unauthorized commercial nursery operation. The citation claimed that my 6 lavender plants constituted a business enterprise requiring special permits and zoning variances. I realized then that reasonable approaches would not work with Karen Pemberton. During my years in environmental consulting, I had learned that some battles require creative solutions. Fortunately, my work had connected me with attorneys specializing in municipal law, real estate developers who understood zoning intricacies, and city planners who knew every loophole in the books. I began my research that evening, pulling up property records, HOA bylaws, and municipal ordinances. What I discovered was fascinating. The Grandview Manor HOA had been established in 1987 with a very specific set of rules designed to protect property values and maintain aesthetic consistency. However, the original developers had included several provisions that most residents, including Karen, had never bothered to read carefully. Section 12-3-15 of the original covenant stated that any property owner could petition the county to establish their land as an agricultural preservation zone if they could demonstrate legitimate farming or horticultural activities. Such designation would supersede HOA authority over landscaping decisions and provide significant tax advantages. The catch was that the petitioner needed to prove they were engaged in legitimate agricultural education or research. My graduate degree in sustainable agriculture and my consulting firm's work with organic farming initiatives made me uniquely qualified to meet those requirements. I spent the next month meticulously documenting my lavender cultivation as part of an ongoing research project into Mediterranean herbs adapted for local climate conditions. I photographed growth patterns, measured soil conditions, and compiled detailed notes about drought resistance and pollinator attraction. Meanwhile, Karen continued her campaign against my garden. She organized neighborhood meetings to discuss property value threats and even hired a lawyer to send increasingly aggressive demand letters. She seemed to believe that persistence and intimidation would eventually force me to capitulate. The irony was that Karen's relentless documentation of my violations was actually helping me build my case. Every photograph she took, every measurement she recorded, every complaint she filed became evidence of the legitimate horticultural research taking place on my property. Her own obsessive behavior was creating the paper trail I needed to prove my agricultural activities. I filed my petition with the county agricultural department on a Tuesday morning, including Karen's photographs as supporting documentation. The application required demonstration of ongoing research activities, detailed cultivation records, and proof of educational value to the community. Thanks to Karen's meticulous stalking of my garden, I had all the evidence required and more. The county's response was swift and decisive. Within 2 weeks, they granted my petition and designated my property as an official agricultural research zone. The designation came with several interesting benefits that I had not initially considered. Agricultural zones were exempt from most landscaping restrictions, allowed for the construction of research facilities and greenhouses, and permitted the sale of agricultural products directly from the property. But the most beautiful aspect of the agricultural designation was Section 47-12-2 of the County Agricultural Code. Any property designated for agricultural research could expand its growing operations onto adjacent undeveloped land through a streamlined permit process, provided the expansion served legitimate research purposes and did not exceed 2 acres total. I had noticed during my property research that the small vacant lot directly behind Karen's house was actually owned by the county and had been sitting unused for nearly a decade. The lot was classified as surplus municipal property and could be purchased by qualifying agricultural operations for a fraction of market value. My purchase offer was approved within 3 days. For $28,000, I acquired half an acre of land that shared a property line with Karen's pristine backyard. The agricultural designation allowed me to begin operations immediately, without the typical environmental review process that could take months. I started small, naturally. A dozen more lavender plants, some rosemary, and a few experimental herb varieties that required daily monitoring and documentation. The research station I constructed was completely compliant with county agricultural guidelines, featuring a small greenhouse, composting area, and irrigation system fed by a perfectly legal agricultural well. Karen's first complaint arrived via certified mail 3 days after I began expanding operations. She objected to the industrial farming equipment in her viewshed and demanded immediate cessation of all activities. What she called industrial equipment was actually a standard drip irrigation timer and a small greenhouse that met all setback requirements. Her second complaint focused on the commercial vehicle traffic generated by my research activities. This referred to the weekly delivery truck that brought organic fertilizer and the occasional visit from graduate students who helped with data collection. Both activities were explicitly protected under agricultural zoning provisions. By the third complaint, Karen had engaged a different lawyer and was threatening legal action against both me and the county. She claimed that the agricultural designation was fraudulent and demanded a full investigation into my fake farming operation. This complaint was particularly amusing since my research had already produced 2 peer-reviewed papers on drought-resistant Mediterranean herbs, and I had been invited to present my findings at the State Agricultural Conference. The final phase of my project required expanded growing space to test lavender variety performance under different soil conditions. The County Agricultural Office approved my request to lease an additional acre of municipal land adjacent to my existing research area. This new plot happened to be located directly across the street from Karen's front yard, giving her an unobstructed view of my growing operation. I planted lavender in carefully planned rows, each variety clearly labeled with research identification markers that looked remarkably like a commercial farm operation. The agricultural zoning allowed me to install professional-grade equipment including automated irrigation systems, soil monitoring devices, and a weather station that collected data every 15 minutes. Karen's response was predictably explosive. She organized an emergency HOA meeting and demanded immediate action to stop what she called an industrial agriculture invasion of their residential neighborhood. She threatened to sue everyone involved and claimed that property values were plummeting due to my commercial farming enterprise. What Karen had failed to understand was that agricultural zones enjoy substantial legal protections specifically designed to prevent exactly the kind of harassment she had been directing at me. The right to farm legislation in our state makes it nearly impossible for residential property owners to successfully challenge legitimate agricultural operations, regardless of HOA rules or neighborhood complaints. The morning Karen discovered my final surprise was a Tuesday in late September. I was working in the main lavender field when I heard her distinctive screech from across the street. She was standing in her driveway, holding what appeared to be an official document, her face cycling through various shades of red and purple. The document was a notification from the County Transportation Department regarding their new agricultural vehicle route designation. My research operation qualified for large vehicle access permits, which meant delivery trucks, farm equipment, and research vehicles could now use the residential streets surrounding Karen's house as a designated agricultural corridor. But the real revelation came when Karen read the attached environmental impact statement. My lavender research had attracted attention from the State Agricultural University, who wanted to establish a permanent field research station on my property. The expansion would include graduate student housing, a processing facility for value-added agricultural products, and public educational programs that would bring visitors to tour the research operations. All of these activities were not only legal but actively encouraged under state agricultural development initiatives. The county was so enthusiastic about the research potential that they had fast-tracked approval for a 10-year expansion plan that would eventually encompass nearly 5 acres of what had once been quiet suburban land adjacent to Karen's property. As Karen stood there reading through page after page of agricultural development permits, research facility construction plans, and expanded vehicle access authorizations, I could see the exact moment when she realized what had happened. Her obsessive campaign to remove 6 lavender plants from my front yard had inadvertently provided me with all the documentation needed to transform her quiet suburban neighborhood into a legitimate working farm operation that would operate in perpetuity just steps from her bedroom window. The look on her face was absolutely priceless as she understood that every complaint she had filed, every photograph she had taken, and every violation notice she had issued had become evidence supporting my agricultural research claims. Her own meticulous documentation of my violations had helped secure permanent agricultural protection for an operation that would expand year after year, bringing trucks, tractors, students, and tourists directly into what she had once considered her personal domain. Karen's mouth fell open as she stared at the final page of the county notification, which outlined the public easement rights that would allow agricultural vehicles to access my research facility through the residential streets she had fought so hard to protect.